Welcome back to week 2 of our Career Kickstart Bootcamp for GGU graduates. If you missed last week's session, I encourage you to watch the recording, which you should have received via email from Law Career Development. Also, if you haven't yet printed out the worksheet for today's session, please do so now. If that's not possible, grab some pen and a paper. Each week, we'll start our sessions with a check-in from last week's homework. Last week, I asked you to take 5 actions to take care of your needs, clear at least 2 obstacles that were getting in the way of your job search, set aside time on your calendar to dedicate to job search activities, and choose a reward system to honor your weekly job search achievements. How did things go? If there were any questions raised by the homework, please let your Law Career Development counselor know, and they can help you out. As a reminder, this session is part of a 6-week webinar series. We've rearranged some of the topics to add a module on acing your job interview. And here's an updated overview of the series. Today, we'll be focusing on identifying your ideal job and your target market. If there are topics you wanted me to cover but don't see addressed here, please send an email with those topic suggestions to lawcareer@ggu.edu. It's essential to find the job that's right for you. Most of the attorneys I worked with who ended up feeling burnt out and dissatisfied in their jobs were in positions that were not a good fit for their strengths and values. Taking the time now will ensure you end up where you are supposed to go and put you on the path for long-term success. This Yogi Berra quote reminded me of an experience I had right after I took the bar exam. As soon as the bar exam ended, my law school classmate and I wanted to get out of town. We hadn't made any advanced plans, so we got in the car and just started driving. We decided to cross the Golden Gate Bridge and head up Highway 1. But this was the last day of July, and there was fog everywhere. The weather was cold and windy, and after a few hours heading north, we were cranky and disappointed. We knew that a few of our friends were headed to Disneyland, and at that point, we were ready for the happiest place on earth. So we turned our car around and started heading for Southern California. Now keep in mind, this was in the days before cell phones, so we had to keep stopping along the way to use payphones to try to find a place to stay in Los Angeles. After a long drive down the 5, we eventually made it to Disneyland, but we were tired, stressed, and disoriented by the time we got there. Looking back, I often wondered, what if we had just made the decision at the beginning of the trip to head to Disneyland? The drive would have taken half the time, and we would have saved a lot of frustration and a few extra tanks of gas. So what has this got to do with your job search? Just like planning a trip, having a target destination in mind will make the path between you and your future employment shorter, more effective, and a lot less frustrating. Your actions can be more purposeful, and it becomes a lot easier for people to help you achieve your goals. I'm curious, when people ask you what kind of legal work you're seeking, how do you answer? Do you answer with confidence and specificity? Do you answer with specificity but worry that you're cutting off options? Do you answer with a list of things you'd be willing to do? Do you answer with a list of things you would not be willing to do? Do you say you'll do anything? Or do you just have general discomfort answering that question? Now, it's not uncommon for recent graduates to feel like they can't afford to be picky. They need a job and will work for whoever will hire them. But the irony is that by not having a target job to aim for, it becomes much harder to get a job. I had a reminder of this important lesson when I launched my coaching practice here in Portland. Because this was a new venture and I was new to the area, I didn't want to limit the clients I'd work with. I told people that I handle life issues and career issues, that I work with everyone, not just lawyers, and that I can work with clients anywhere in the United States if they're willing to meet with me on phone or by using Skype. Well, as you might imagine, my cover all the bases approach backfired. My approach was too generic and not memorable. When I changed the way I started telling people what I did and started introducing myself as someone who helps unhappy lawyers find satisfaction in their work, people started paying attention. They could relate to that introduction, and it gave them a way to remember me. And that simple change has translated into many more client referrals. So let's revisit our friends Candidate A and Candidate B from last week's session to see how this would play out for new lawyers. Candidate A wanted to practice immigration law. He only stumbled upon this interest during an externship in his final semester of law school, so he didn't have a lot of work experience or classes in the field. While waiting for his bar results, he joined the American Immigration Lawyers Association, got a part-time law clerk position drafting visa applications, and met with attorneys who practiced in the field. In fact, it was during one of these meetings that he learned about the interview opportunity. When he attended the interview, he was able to show the employer his interest in their field by pointing to these activities. Candidate B was focused primarily on getting a job, regardless of the practice area. He was never comfortable answering the question of what kind of job he wanted. He wasn't really sure what would be the best type of law for him. And besides, if he identified something specific, he felt like he would be limiting the kinds of opportunities he would hear about. At the interview, he had a hard time articulating for the employer why he was interested in immigration work and what he had done to prepare for the work he was interviewing for. Do you see how limiting it can be to not express a focus? The key to a successful job search is to be able to articulate where you want to go. There are lots of different types of jobs out there, and if you don't identify what you're looking for, how will you recognize which one is right for you? And how will you make yourself attractive to your prospective employer if you don't know anything about them? Now, it's okay if you're able to narrow things down to a few specific areas. Just be prepared to articulate what you want in each of those areas. For the remainder of today's session, we'll be spending time identifying your target job or jobs and what it will take to get you there. So I'd like you to turn to the first page of today's handout. And we will focus for now on the row on that front page that's labeled I Want. In the column labeled Who, write down any ideas you have about the kinds of clients you want to serve. Who are they? Are they companies, inventors, the elderly, state agencies? Maybe people who've been injured or people accused of crimes, members of a particular demographic community? Maybe you don't even want clients. Whatever you know about who you want to serve, write it down in that first box. Next, I want you to think about how you want to help these clients. Do you want to solve their problems? Do you want to be their advocate? Do you want to help them plan for their futures or protect their assets, analyze their concerns, or be their trusted advisor? This will likely involve using some verbs. This is really about how you want to spend your time and talent helping your clients. Now, if you're struggling to articulate how you want to help, think about what you do well. What feedback have you received from professors, supervisors, and mentors about your legal skills? Where do you excel? Next, let's focus on the issues or subjects that interest you most. In the What column, indicate any particular practice areas that interest you. Are there subjects you're passionate about? Perhaps you have a sense of the kinds of problems you want to help your clients solve. So take a moment and write those down in the What column. And finally, I want you to think about where you want to work. And I tend to think of this in 3 different dimensions. First, I want you to think about any geographical limitations you may have. Is there a particular region or location you're focused on? If so, indicate what that is. You can also think about it in terms of the employment setting. So do you have a sense of whether you'd want to be in a private law firm or work for the government or for a nonprofit? And indicate that there. I also want you to give some thought to workplace culture. Do you do better in a structured, formal environment, Would you be more comfortable in something informal and not structured, or maybe just a non-traditional environment altogether? So whatever qualities you know about where you want to work, please write that in that at the end of that first row. So now let's put it all together. When you add up all of the things you've written in your I want row, this becomes your target position. And it's okay to have more than one target. Perhaps you have a more specific target, like plaintiff's employment law, and a more general one, civil litigation. Whatever it is, list your target or targets in the box on the top of page 1. And if your targets are really different from each other, you might consider printing out multiple copies of page 1 and completing a different sheet for each target. While it's helpful for you to know what you are seeking, it's even more powerful when you can communicate it to others. So let's return to the question I asked you earlier. When someone asks you what you do or what kind of work you are seeking, you can use the formula on the top of this, or the information in the top row of your chart to develop your 10-second introduction or elevator pitch. So take a look at the top of page 2 and transfer the information from your I want row on page 1 to the corresponding lines here at the formula on the top of page 2. Now take a look, because I flipped a few of these categories around. The order is a little bit different. So this I kind of think of as Mad Libs for lawyers. So how plus who plus what plus where is a great way to introduce yourself. So for example, I advise young families on their estate planning options in a small firm setting. Or I'm focused on protecting the legal interests of video game developers in Silicon Valley. Or I'm an advocate for refugees seeking asylum in the US along the Texas border. Now this will work even if you can't fill in each box. For example, you might know that you are an advocate for refugees even if you don't know where. Or you will work with parents of special needs kids even if you don't know exactly how. Now one note, you may have noticed in the examples I just shared, you didn't hear the phrase I want, as in, I want to advise young families on their estate planning options in a small firm setting. And I did that very deliberately. I want you to step into your new professional identity now. You don't need this to be something far off in the future. And I want you to see yourself in that role so that others will start to see you in that role. And this is particularly true for those of you who may already be licensed. There's no reason why you need to wait for the future to have people see you in the way you want to be. So as part of your homework this week, I want you to practice your elevator pitch. Practice it with 3 people and ask them for some feedback. The goal here is to become fluent in introducing yourself and articulating what it is that you're looking for. So once you're able to tell people the role you're seeking, you now need to take stock of what you've already done to prepare yourself for this work. And thankfully, you're not starting from scratch. Think back to pre-law school jobs and law school internships, externships, courses, clinics, pro bono, and other activities. What have you done to develop the knowledge or experience you'll need in your chosen field? So if you turn back to the front page of your handout, we'll now take a look at the second row labeled I have. And I want you to take a few minutes to fill in what you've already accomplished in each of these categories. You want to be as specific as possible with some examples that you can use as evidence to show employers that you are committed and prepared to do their work. For example, under who, you can make note of any experience you've had working with your target population. Under how, list examples of work you've done in internships or clinics using the skills described in the row above. Under what, list examples of classes you've taken, work you've done, journals you've read, reports you've written, or CLEs you've attended in your subject area. And under where, List any exposure to the type of organization you've listed above or any connection you have to the geographic market. Be as specific as possible. Take pride in what you've done and be confident sharing this experience. You will use this information as strategic talking points in cover letters and job interviews. After you assess the qualifications you already have, it's time to understand what it is that employers will be seeking from you. How well do you know what employers will be expecting for a new lawyer in our who, how, what, and where categories? To the extent you know, write it in the corresponding boxes. And to the extent that you don't know, I want you to prioritize gaining this knowledge. One quick way to do that is to examine job announcements that you see for opportunities that interest you. What is it that those employers are seeking? What skills and knowledge do they want? Add those to your chart. You can also use informational interviews, which we'll discuss in greater detail in a future session, to ask the attorneys you meet about what employers expect to see in new graduates. Once you've accumulated knowledge about what employers seek, compare it to your credentials. Where are the gaps? What will you need to develop to make yourself a credible candidate for the jobs you want? In other words, if you start with what the employers want and you subtract what you already have, that will identify what it is you need to develop for employers to take you seriously. I want you to identify these gaps in the I need row of your chart. Now here's where focusing on this transition now will really pay off for you. Now that you have some awareness of what's missing to make you a complete candidate, what simple steps can you take to fill the gap? So I'll want you to take a few minutes to write down whatever ideas you have. And not just what those ideas are, but what are they? When will you do them? When will you start them? What do you need to accomplish them? Who can support you in this? And then how will you update your application materials and your network to reflect this growth? We'll come up with a few suggestions together. And I also encourage you to work with your law career development counselor to brainstorm some quick ways to fill these gaps. So if you've noticed you have some gaps in your who, you first want to focus on your goal, which is to understand your client's needs, pain points, and strengths. And there's several ways that you can do this. Getting some work experience, whether it's through pro bono efforts, through a bridge fellowship, or contract work, can put you in touch with your clients and what their needs are. It will help you develop some cultural sensitivity to your clients and give you something to talk about with employers to show you are really committed to your clients' issues. I also encourage you to get involved in community or industry organizations where you're likely to interact with your target population of clients. If you have gaps in your how, your goal is to start developing demonstrable skills. So you want to seek out opportunities to do things, not just to study things. Focus on skill building, even if the subject area is outside of your target area. In other words, you want to learn how to walk the walk and how to actually be a lawyer. So again, finding experience, whether it's pro bono or through a bridge fellowship or some paid contract work, is probably the best way to do this. But I also encourage you to take a look at continuing legal education programs where you can be trained side by side with other lawyers on some of these skills. And so for this session, for this area, we want you to focus on CLEs that are dealing with skill building, how to take a deposition, or how to write an appeals brief, or whatever the skill set is that you are looking to learn. You can find out about lots of different CLE opportunities through the Onward and Upward e-newsletter that you receive each week from Law Career Development. Now, if you have gaps in your what area, then you want to really focus on how you can talk the talk. Your goal here is not only to build your expertise, but find ways to showcase it. And we have lots of suggestions to help with that. So in addition to getting experience, we really promote getting involved through bar associations. And these can be bar associations that are dedicated to a particular practice area, like the Intellectual Property Law Association, or a section of a larger bar association that's focused on a particular practice area, like the Family Law section of the Bar Association of San Francisco. Getting involved will put you in touch with other lawyers. You can go to their CLE events where they're dealing with particular substantive issues of law. You can go to their events and talk to people and understand what the issues are and find out from them how you can fill those gaps. I also encourage you to use the resources of CEB. They offer lots of free resources to law students and recent graduates, and you can read about them at the link that appears on your screen. They have different practice guides and resource materials that can be really helpful to really solidifying your knowledge in a particular area. You might even rely on the nutshell guides that you used when you were in law school. And that can be a great way to get a nice overview of the issues in a particular area of law, really pick up the jargon, understand the standards that need to be met in that particular area of law. So that can be really helpful. I also encourage you to read and even write articles on legal and industry issues. So there are lots of resources that you can use both to learn about what's going on out there and then to share that knowledge. Legal newspapers are an obvious choice, so you want to make sure you are continuing to read the Daily Journal and the Recorder if you're in the Bay Area. If you're in a different location, find out what the legal newspaper is in that location. If you're a member of a bar association, read their newsletters. There are also lots of blogs out there. There are probably over 3,000 blogs dedicated to legal issues, and you can learn about them on the ABA's website. If you just Google BLAWGS, you can find the fantastic directory of law blogs that the ABA maintains. And consider writing for some of these. A lot of these blogs will welcome guest authors, and so that can be a great way for you to start showcasing your expertise. You may also find different journals that highlight different areas of law, and those are great to read. And the goal here is when you're having a conversation with an attorney, you can reference these articles that you've read and maybe even educate the lawyers that you're speaking to. LinkedIn groups are another way of staying in touch with the current issues in your field. You may notice if you join some of these groups that people will share articles or raise questions, and that can really help you stay up to date. And if you find some interesting articles, I encourage you to share them with your LinkedIn groups. It's really helpful for people to see that you are a contributor, and it's a great way to start building your profile. If you prefer to listen than to read, then take a look at some of the different podcasts that are available on legal issues. And I put a link on the screen that you can look at that highlights several really interesting law-related podcasts. So finally, if you find that you are still stuck on trying to figure out what areas of law interest you, you might find the Official Guide to Legal Specialties to be very helpful. Law Career Development has several copies of this book, and it profiles 30 of the most common practice areas. In the book, they've interviewed different attorneys and really described the day-to-day practice in these different specialties. And that can give you a nice vocabulary of what's out there and what the differences are between these different legal fields. Now, if you have gaps in where, I'm thinking primarily of folks who are new to a particular market, your job is to become a local. And you want that to happen as quickly as possible. So you want to get to know the names of the local players, get local affiliations on your resume, and begin building relationships locally. So here are some suggestions. In addition to getting some legal experience in that community, I encourage you to connect with alumni. Now, these can be alumni of Golden Gate. They can be alumni from your undergraduate school. But it's just helpful when you reach out to a stranger with whom you share some kind of affinity you'll find that they're very receptive to hearing from you. And in this case, I wouldn't worry about connecting with alumni who do exactly what you want to do. The goal here is to just start building relationships with people in your new or target community. And perhaps they can make some other introductions or lead you to others who do work that you find interesting. I also encourage you to join local bar and community organizations. And one of the smartest strategies there is to reach out to the leaders of those organizations. You'll find that the officers or the membership director are really eager to bring new people into their organizations. And so they're very welcoming and they know lots of people. So I would encourage you to build relationships with the leaders. And then when you start going to their events, introduce yourself, and they'll be really excited to introduce you to everybody else in the organization. So please make yourself known to the folks in charge. I also encourage you to read local news. So stay in touch with what's going on, generally speaking, and as well in the legal industry, and understand what's going on with the different law firms and lawyers and judges in that particular community. Depending on where you're going, there may be a culture of different meetups and different groups that get together from time to time. These may be less formal than bar association groups. These might be networking groups of like-minded individuals or people who want to support each other. And so these can be a really good way to connect with others in a less formal environment. And so you can search on meetup.com for different professionally oriented meetups in your region. And then, of course, you want to focus on your own network and let the folks in your community know that you're relocating or that you've moved to a new location, and find out if they have colleagues in that destination. Having those introductions can be a really easy way to get to know new attorneys in your community. Well, new to you attorneys in your community. And I do want to pause here and just also encourage you not to let money be an obstacle. I know for a lot of graduates, they look at getting involved in bar associations and going to events as something that can be cost prohibitive. And I encourage you to don't fall victim to that line of thinking. Many organizations have reduced fees or free memberships for recent graduates, or offer scholarships to attend their events. Volunteer at their events or their membership drives, and that can bring value to the organization, and it's a quick way for you to get known by their leadership. It doesn't hurt to ask if that organization offers volunteer or scholarship opportunities, and it's a great way to start connecting and getting known. So another piece of homework for this week is for you to think about one thing that you will commit to doing to close the gap in each of your who, how, what, and where categories. So using the suggestions that we included on page 2, go back and fill in the line on page 1 that's labeled I will, and list some of the activities that you will commit to doing this week. In our remaining time together today, let's move from our understanding what our target role is to identifying our target employers. Now turn to page 3 of your handout. At the top of the page, fill in any information you can to describe your target employer type. Next, I want you to use the chart on page 3 to identify any potential employers that match this target. Now, you may find it easier to transfer these headings to a workbook in Excel so that you can keep expanding it as you have interactions with the organization and as you apply for jobs. For now, in the chart below, list any organizations that you are already aware of that do the work on your target, for your target employers. And for each organization, indicate whether you have any connections there and what those connections are. You can also make note of any interactions you've had with that organization. Once you've added all the organizations you can think of, do some research to expand your list of potential employers. Consider some of the resources on page 4 of your handout to help you identify organizations. For example, if you are focused on law firms, Martindale Hubble or martindale.com is a great resource to identify private law firms around the world. If you're focusing on large law firms, nowdirectory.com is going to be your best resource. And for those of you who are interested in work that the State Bar of California certifies specialists in, I would encourage you to search their list of specialists on the website. That list will give you names of particular attorneys, but you can look to see what organizations those attorneys work for and add any organizations that interest you to your list. If you're focused more on public interest and government opportunities, take a look at psjd.org, which is a terrific database of government and public interest organizations around the world. If you are focusing on corporations and in-house work, the Directory of Corporate Counsel, which is available on Lexis, is a great way to search companies that have offices and attorneys where you're located. And regardless of what kind of work you want to do, bar association membership directories can be very helpful. You'll also find on lots of different bar associations, they'll have a Find a Lawyer section on their website. For example, CELA, which is the California Employment Lawyers Association, has a great Find a Lawyer directory on their website, and I have a link on the screen. And you can search there and find all different kinds of employment lawyers and their specialties on their website. I also encourage you to be savvy when you're reading articles. Pay attention to the quotes. Who do they interview and where do those attorneys work? Some of those attorneys might be good folks for you to follow up with, or their firms might be organizations that you want to learn more about. I also encourage you to search alumni directories, whether it's of Golden Gate or your undergraduate school. And you can similarly look at LinkedIn profiles and groups to find other attorneys in your region or in your area of interest. So, and then finally, touch base with your own network. Ask people, who do they know that does that kind of work? As you compile your list of target employers, show it to folks in your network. Find out if they have connections at those organizations, and see if there are organizations missing that should be on your list. So continue adding organizations to the list. You may notice that certain names keep coming up. Pay attention to them. I also want you to look at the websites for the organizations that you're adding to your list. Search through their roster of attorneys to identify people with whom you share a connection, like other Golden Gate grads or alumni of your undergraduate school, or maybe an adjunct who teaches at GGU that works at that organization. List these connections on your spreadsheet. Learn whatever you can about them. What phrases does the law firm use to describe their work? Do some Google searches of those key phrases to identify other organizations that do similar work. And you can do the same thing for the actual attorney profiles. And you may find that those profiles contain good language for you to use when you're updating your resume or your LinkedIn profile. Reading the attorney profiles will give you some other ideas about how to fill gaps in some of your other boxes. So pay attention to the different affiliations that those attorneys have and seek those out. Those might be places you want to join or get more involved. Also pay attention to whether the organizations have a social media presence. If so, follow them on Twitter or LinkedIn and Facebook so that you can stay up to date on everything that's going on with that organization. And if they post current job announcements on their website, bookmark those pages and check them frequently. In our next few workshops, we'll discuss additional ways to utilize this information as part of your job search and networking strategy. Spending time on these exercises now will pay off for you in multiple ways. You'll be able to articulate your strengths in your cover letters and create connections with prospective employers on your interviews. You'll develop greater clarity about the kinds of positions you're seeking and the kinds of employers you want to work for. You'll be able to gain a sense of role models and potential mentors as you learn more about some of the leaders in the field. And you'll lay the foundation to building your reputation and becoming a better lawyer. So your homework for this week is to identify at least one action that you can take to close the gap in each of your who, what, how, and where columns. I also want you to construct and practice your 10-second introduction with 3 different people and get some feedback. And then using the resources on page 4 of your handout, add at least 10 potential target organizations to your list on page 3. Review their websites and identify any connections you have with those organizations. We will be using this information in later sessions, so have them available when you view the future webinars. So next week, we'll be building on the information we discussed today to form relationships and raise your profile within the legal community. We'll highlight ways to connect with attorneys in one-on-one and group settings. I'll also offer strategies to stay organized with all of your networking activity. So please remember to bring today's worksheets with you to next week's session, and we'll see you next week. If you have any questions, please contact Law Career Development at lawcareer@ggU.edu. Thank you.